Everyone. This is Cheron Davis. I'm an associate professor of reading education at the Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. My research passions encompass teacher preparation at historically Black colleges and universities, multicultural reading pedagogy, promoting equity and justice through literacy, and early literacy intervention techniques. I also had the pleasure of recently serving 2 years on the ILA William Gray Citation of Merit Awards Committee, with the first year as a member and the second one as the chair of the committee. So we have a great program scheduled for you this evening, and I'm excited, so excited to introduce our esteemed award winners. But first, a few housekeeping notes. So we've allotted time for a Q&A. You can submit your questions via the chat box at any time during the presentation, and we will answer as many questions as possible. You can minimize the chat box on your screen if the conversations become distracting. The archived closed caption recording of this event will be available within the next 5 days. So you'll be able to access that at literacyworldwide.org/digital events. All right. And so with that, it is my honor to introduce our first award winner, Gwynne Ellen Ash. Gwynne was honored this year as the recipient of the ILA 2024 Jerry Johns Outstanding Teacher Educator in Reading Award. Gwynne is a professor of reading education at Texas State University. She earned her BA and MA in English literature before teaching English language arts and reading at a Title I middle school in San Antonio, Texas. She holds Texas certification in 4 through 8, 6 through 12, ELAR, 4 through 8 social studies, and a reading specialist, early childhood through 12th grade, with an ESL credential in early childhood through 12th grade. She earned her PhD in reading education at the University of Georgia, and for the past 24 years, she's taught undergraduate and graduate courses in reading instructional methods and reading assessment, children's and young adult literature, as well as a capstone for reading specialists. Gwynne, who is a former member of the ILA Board of Directors, has been honored with several awards for her service, research, and teaching, but she considers being selected as the Jerry Johns Outstanding Teacher Educator in Reading to be the highlight of her career, educating pre-service and in-service teachers. Without any further ado, please welcome Gwynne Ellen Ash. Good evening, Gwynne.
Thank you, Cheron, for what a great introduction. I really appreciate it. What a warm welcome. So when you win a teaching award and people ask you to talk about it, the first thing you wonder is, what am I going to do talking about teaching? And so I decided that rather than talking about teaching, I would do a little teaching. So I am going to do a brief lesson that is related to my teaching of middle grade students. And because we have people from all sorts of areas, I thought I would do something that was more middle grades oriented and talk a little bit about critical media literacy. So as background, I have a 10-year-old. I'm helping raise my sister's 10-year-old daughter. And so I have a lot of insight into young middle grade students. And so I wanted to talk about the impact of veiled digital advertising, that is influencers, paid content, and product placement. We've all taught in ELA, because it's in both the Texas state standards and in the Common Core state standards, about propaganda and advertising techniques. But today, as you all probably know, most kids view most of their advertising online. And some advertising is very clear. There are the commercials that come up between the YouTube ads, and they can tell ads that are clear to them. But there's a lot of what we call veiled digital advertising. And that includes product placement, paid content, and influencers. Product placement is when a product or service appears in an element, whether it's a photograph or a TV show or a movie, or it's mentioned by a character, or it's featured in a book as part of the plot. We also see them featured in song lyrics. So examples of product placement might be in video gaming. So here's some examples here, or in a cartoon that students might watch online, or even on American Idol, where the Coca-Cola product placement, which was later changed, was widely seen by many people. In addition to product placement, there is paid content. If you've ever been on an airplane and read the airplane magazines, which are quickly disappearing, you'll see in them quite a lot of paid posts. We also see them in fashion magazines, where what seems to be an article about how to do your lip liner is really a paid post by L'Oreal or a different cosmetics company. We also see things as presented by, sponsored by, affiliated with, powered by. And we see paid content not only in these articles, but in videos, infographics, Instagram, Snapchat stories, YouTube, and podcasts. Here's some examples where Hot Wheels is a paid post, or a Taco Bell filter on Snapchat, or here's Shopify presents a podcast, or we have sponsored posts on Instagram and Facebook. This is a young gamer who is talking about a game, and you might be familiar with the games that students use. And
huge thanks to BBC Wonder Chase for sponsoring today's video. Hey gamers, today I'm playing the BBC official Wonder Chase. My mission is to find all of the hidden stickers across 5 different worlds. Beat the obbies, master parkour, team up with friends to get the ball into the goals, and discover even more fun challenges in each of the worlds. We got Hacker, we got the 15th Doctor. I'm so excited. Let's do this.
So even in the games and fun that students consume, they often see these type of sponsored content. And then finally, influencers. Influencers are content creators, people who are paid to produce that content, whether through advertising or through direct payments. They often promote or review products to their followers. And they're sometimes sent products to review with the idea that a positive review might lead to a continued relationship and continued products. Oftentimes, influencers do not disclose that they're being paid to talk about the products that are part of, say, their how-to videos, whether that's related to beauty or crafting or other things. Now, people who have young children or have had young children in the last few years might be familiar with Ryan's World. Ryan was a young influencer that began in the mid 2010s with a toy review site. And his estimated line of profit from his toys that were produced in 2021 was 27 million. More recently, in 2023, it was $30 million. There are young influencers that do clothes, young influencers that do makeup. Young influencers here are getting braces, particular type of removable Invisalign braces, and putting this on their Instagram, in this case, to share with young people. But they're not identified as an advertisement. It's just Invisalign is sponsoring us as we talk about this. Advertisers even tell us that the young people who are doing this should be used to sell items in particular ways. For example, they might use tutorials to show how to use something. Unboxings were some of the first products for games and other toys with children. And these product reviews allow students to see the product, unbox it, and then try to find it themselves to purchase it. If you're around young people now, you know about challenges and how important challenges are to students online, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok. And kids have created these. Some have been damaging and others have been more light-hearted. But for the most part, challenges feed more people into what influencers are recommending. And they also suggest doing Q&As on how to do things or what to do them. do with them. I'm sorry. And why has advertising moved to this veiled digital perspective? Well, we know that over $15 billion a year is spent in the US on product placements, estimated to be 25 billion, by 2026, and over 40 billion worldwide. About 75% of consumers look to social media to figure out what to buy and for recommendations for doing so. And almost 70% of consumers trust recommendations from the influencers that they follow. Influencer marketing campaigns are profitable for the advertisements, returning almost $6 for every dollar spent. And in particular, we see fashion, beauty, and gaming as popular products for influencer marketing, with beauty being a target for tweens. It's the new market approach. So how did I learn about that? Well, this is Hannah. Hannah is 10. And this summer, we were traveling to London and we found ourselves in Harrods and we were walking through. And Hannah was telling me that she wanted to get this Boom Boom cream from a company. And I was like, where did you learn about Boom Boom cream? That is something for adults. And so I asked her where she found out about it. So, Hannah, remember when we were in London and we went to Harrods and you saw the perfume that you were interested in, Sol de Janeiro?
No, Sol de Janeiro.
Sol de Janeiro. How did you learn about that?
YouTube.
What on YouTube? How did you learn about it on YouTube?
Preppy kids.
Preppy kids. But do they talk about
Yes.
it, or how did they? So what do they say? It's not a quiz.
How do I explain? I don't really know how to explain it. They're always using it. There's a lot of videos of people doing their skincare, and most of the time they use Sol de Janeiro.
So they might show you, this is how I wash my face,
Yeah.
and that's what they're doing with it. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you, Hannah. So we had this conversation and we saw the video and I was very interested. And then about a month later, there was an article in the New York Times that was talking about tweens buying, it looks like Bum Bum, but it's Boom Boom, but it is for your bum bum. So that's why it's confusing. It's a firming cream for adults and it's from the Sol de Janeiro company. But they also have perfumes that students use and others. And it's being widely promoted among very young people. So, Hannah, remember when we were in London and Allure had an article on Generation Beauty about how preteens are now being targeted. 10-year-olds are buying facial creams and moisturizing. And so we wonder about how they view these types of advertising. This is from the New York Times article. And it looks at how 12 to 15-year-olds are using their mother's cream or going to department stores and buying these particular types of cosmetics because they have seen them used by influencers online. And according to one of these 15-year-olds, he talks about that it's just one of those products that all these people are getting them, so you feel like you have to get them too. Now, I was a child in the 80s, so I saw plenty of advertising in magazines and cartoons and in commercials in between those. But the advertising that our students are seeing is even during what they're consuming at school. When a teacher shares a YouTube video and there is a commercial at the beginning, or when they're watching even a Disney film and there is product placement. And so if we want to teach kids about veiled advertising, we want to first introduce these concepts to them. What are product placement, paid content, and influencers? And can we provide them with visual and video examples like these? We can tie this to standards-based instruction on advertising and propaganda, or it can be a standalone critical media literacy unit on its own, having kids think about how they're being advertised to. And then we can talk about the difference between explicit advertising versus veiled advertising. A celebrity who holds up a product and says, I'm here telling you to buy this, seems a much more clear advertising approach than one just saying, hey, I'm washing my face with my favorite moisturizer, and this is what I do. And so it's good to have students see a commercial versus a product placement an advertisement versus paid content, perhaps in a magazine or in a video podcast. And then native content, what influencers might produce on their own versus paid content where they're reviewing information. And it's good to have kids have time practicing identifying this veiled advertising in situ or where they see it. So we can have them collect photos, videos, audios of sample. Ask kids to tell you who they watch on Instagram, on YouTube, and on TikTok, if you're allowed to study TikTok in your state. I'm not in my state. And have them bring links to examples to class. You can study movies that are appropriate for the age group or younger to look at product placement in the films. And you can look at brand partnerships that might have paid content and influencer advertising that is connected to kids in this age group. An example that I like to do with students is to create cards that have different types of product placements. So they're almost like examples of what they might see. And so you can create a deck that includes things like, is a character drinking a soft drink in what we're watching, a movie or a TV show? Is there a character shopping in a store where we can see that they're at the Gap or they're at Banana Republic? Is there particular athletic apparel in a sports movie? So they're watching a movie about baseball players and you notice that Nike or Adidas is someone who is part of the uniforms. Sometimes it's even something that's going on in the background of what you're watching. We see often in films and TV shows that there might be a commercial on a TV and a scene for a product that's removed from what they might have identified as central to the story. We might see a person driving a particular car, and that car then says something about the character. We also can see a person using a particular phone or apps on their phone. We see this sometimes with brands of phones. So they're using an iPhone or they're using an Android phone, and students can identify that and see how it's placed. You can also see that something's coming from UPS or Amazon, and that's an advertisement for that company by including it in the content that they're watching. Students, people at restaurants, people bringing things in from restaurants. We can have just people mentioning things. There are shows about or featuring toys. These are particularly an essential part of advertising for younger people. And something as simple as a coffee cup that might be from Starbucks or Pete's or your favorite coffee shop here can be an advertisement, even if it's just picked up and thrown in the garbage. We might look at songs that kids listen to and products that are mentioned in those songs that tell them about what it is that they can do with it or why they might want to purchase it. We see people sharing snacks. People place snacks in movies so that they will appeal to children and others. And then we might also see clothing brands in live events. So in someone being interviewed or doing an interview, not necessarily all scripted television. And then you notice that I have free space. That you'll see in a second how that applies. The people sharing snacks I want to talk about a little bit because there was a study that was done looking at product placement with young children where they watched 2 films, one with high product placement, which was the Chipmunks movie, and one with low products placement, which was Stuart Little. They were both a stop motion animation and computer assisted animation, but the kids watched both films, and then after the film, they were offered a variety of snacks. And what they found was that kids were 3 times more likely to select cheese puffs as their snack after watching the Chipmunk movie because cheese puffs were featured prominently in the film than after watching the Stuart Little film. So showing kids examples of this and how they might be being influenced by product placement, even though they're not aware of it, is helpful. And I suggest that one way that this can be done with kids so that it's fun, but also interesting, is having a product placement bingo. And I've given you 2 bingo sheets because I will tell the story that when I was first teaching, I made up some bingo games for us to play and I photocopied them and I handed them out to the kids. And the first time somebody got bingo, everybody got bingo because I didn't think about the fact that all of my bingo sheets were the same. And so everyone would win at the same time. So what I did was I took some of those examples of product placements and put them in some different bingo cards for students. And then I played a few clips, short clips from films or TV shows or videos where I had identified product placement. Now, something that is advantageous to us as teachers is that when you go online, advertising companies are very happy to talk about how they have placed products in different content, whether that is with an influencer or in a film or in other places. And because of that, and I've included in a reference list and I've given my PowerPoint for people to have, you can go to their pages and they'll tell you, for example, how if you've seen Zootopia, the Disney film, in Zootopia, there are satirized names of a variety of products and stores. For example, instead of Target, it's Targoat, right? Instead of Starbucks, it's Snarlbucks, so that it's related to the Zootopia characters. But there's an entire web page from the advertising company that placed all of those products in Zootopia, where they proudly display what they've done and how, so that it helps us as teachers be able to find these product placements and how they work. They also advertise about collaborations, where advertisements are tied to different shows that are aimed at children. So, for example, when the cereal is going to feature someone from a film that is watched. And then you show kids the short clips and they go and they practice identifying, okay, there were people sharing snacks, and they can play bingo and see if they have them. And then we can talk about what they've identified and how that works for them. This helps us because sometimes with critical media literacy, students become resistant when we are studying what they consider to be the products that bring them pleasure, right? So they don't want to talk about what the song by Chappell Roan means, and they don't want to talk about what's happening in their favorite anime cartoon, but they will do it if they're allowed to have some degree of pleasure and enjoyment, and we haven't just schooled it into uninteresting things for them to do. Now, for you, I do have 2 citations here, including some formal citations, but these are some of the references that I was talking about that could be useful for teachers going forward. So, thegamer.com has a whole section on video game product placements and how they can be useful. Hollywood Branded is the one that talked about how they have placed all of the real world brands and includes the Zootopia infographic that lists all of the product placement in Zootopia. Gwynne.company is a blog that's actually recruiting kid influencers, so it can talk about what they're doing, how they're asking them to do it, and what they're getting paid to do things. There are more what we consider adult articles, such as the Allure Generation Beauty article, or Common Sense Media that looks at product placement and an understanding for teachers and parents on kids being aware of. I mean, I'll tell you, when Hannah, like I said, who's 10, came up with Sol de Janeiro, which I had heard of, but I couldn't figure out how she had heard of it. I was really surprised. The Digital Marketing Institute looked at different influencer marketing statistics, how much placement there is, how much influencers are influencing children and adults. And then the Affluencer also looks at kids' clothing brands and how that is done with product placement as well. I'm coming right up on the end of my time, and I have my email here, and it's also on the PowerPoint that you can download eventually. That's my timer. And I thank you very much for this opportunity. As I said, I'm so excited to have won this because ILA is my academic home, and I feel so proud to be recognized by it. So thank you again.
Not the first, the 100th to congratulate you once again on the work that you do. It is so important. And I would love to say that, you know, after your presentation, all I can think about is getting some boom boom cream for my bum bum. I I think I know that what you're doing is incredibly important as the mother of an 11, almost 12-year-old in a couple of days. I wonder why she wanted facial masks all the time, right? And so knowing that you are doing the work around critical media literacy is, I mean, it is incredible, and it's much needed in this digital age. So thank you for your work, and congratulations again. And with that, We will hear from our next presentation will come from the recipients of the 2024 Diane Lapp and James Flood Professional Collaborator Award, Barbara Wasik and Annemarie Hindman. Barbara is a PNC Endowed Chair in Early Childhood Education in the College of Education and Human Development at Temple University. Her area of research is early language and literacy interventions for children who are at risk for school failure. Her work is focused on children in low socioeconomic and low resource communities with the goal of trying to help close the achievement gap with successful interventions. Barbara has extensive experience in program and curriculum development, and along with her colleague, Annemarie Hindman, she has developed and implemented 2 evidence-based language and literacy professional development interventions for early childhood teachers. Annemarie is a professor of special inclusive education at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She studies how young children build foundational skills, including language, literacy, and social competence throughout the first years of life and during the transition to formal schooling. Today, much of her work focuses on communities in poverty, centers around 3 strands: professional development, interventions for pre and in-service early and elementary educators, classroom-aligned culturally sustaining family interventions, and secondary analysis of large-scale national and international data sets. So without any further ado, please welcome Barbara Wasik and Annemarie Hindman.
Thank you, Cheron.
Thank you so much, Cheron. We're delighted to be here. And hopefully you're seeing some slides. Are you seeing slides, Barbara?
Yes, could you
Awesome.
make
Okay,
it
good.
just for just one slide at a time?
There we go. So today we're going to talk, we're first of all delighted to be honored with this award having to do with our collaboration over time. So I've been joking that it's an award about being able to work together with other people, which is really important. And I'm very fortunate to have been working with Barbara for several years. So the title of our talk is Building Vocabulary Through Classroom Conversations, Translating Research to Practice. And in this talk, we're going to do 3 things. We're going to talk about the goals of our work. We'll talk about the evolution of that work over time, and we'll talk about some key takeaways for educators in the field, including teachers as well as coaches. So Barbara will kick us off with our first real slide.
Thanks, Annemarie. Thanks again, Cheron. So what we're going to talk about today is really the culmination of the work that Annemarie and I have done for over 20 years together. And it has been a great honor to receive this award, again, because of the collaborative nature of it. One of the things that I want, go back, Annemarie. Thank you. Talk about a little bit about the goal of our work. And to put it simply, I think one of the important goals of our work is to be able to teach teachers to develop children's skills to be able to learn to read. A lot of the things that we have focused on has been done in the preschool area. Annemarie and I have also worked in kindergarten and 1st grade, and Annemarie is also doing some important work with toddlers, which we'll talk a little bit about later on. But in general, the work that we have focused on over the years has been in preschool. And one of the important things that we know from research is that preschoolers, long before kids can begin to decode words, to be able to read words, that their language development is an important skill that will actually be the bedrock for them to learn to be able to read. So a lot of our work has been focused on trying to help teachers to support children's language development. And although we know, and again, Annemarie is going to talk about this a little bit later, and we know that phonics are important and it's an important consideration in the science of reading, that again, the foundational skills that need to be established early on have to do with oral language, excuse me. So the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the work that we've done on early language and vocabulary are essential for later reading. Many of our interventions have focused on working with young children to create opportunities for teachers to develop strategies for children to be able to talk and have conversations in classrooms. So I guess one of the questions we would ask is, how do you create those opportunities in classrooms for children to develop language? And I think through the years of experience that Annemarie and I have had working in classrooms, and also importantly, listening to teachers' feedback about being in their classrooms, A lot of teachers have said to us over the years, well, we do that. We do a lot of that. We talk to children, we have children talk to us. But I think that the research that has shown through observations and being in classrooms is that there is a lot of conversations that go on, but often they are controlled and initiated by the teacher, which is not all bad. But if you look at and examine those conversations, a lot of it is teacher driven and a lot of teacher talk. And a lot of the work that we have tried to focus on is trying to change that balance a bit, is to be able to provide children with the opportunity to be able to use language in meaningful contexts. So one, and what I just said is kind of challenging. Again, because I think teachers, and rightfully so, think that they do provide opportunities for young children to talk. But what we try to do through coaching and through our interventions is to try to be able to have teachers become aware of their interactions with children and be able to provide them with some strategies to be able to allow conversations to occur in more, I think, natural ways, but also to be able to give them strategies so that they can promote children's language development. The second part of our work has also been trying to be able to not only invite children to be able to talk, but be able to have teachers to be able to create a back and forth conversation. So to be able to initiate conversations, but also to use strategies such as asking open-ended questions and be able to use some wait time experiences to be able to have children be able to converse back and forth with teachers. I'm going to hand the next slide over to Annemarie.
As we have started thinking about sort of the broader context of education in our work, we think it's important to reiterate the value of keeping language and literacy front of mind in the science of reading, and really focusing in not just on the code focused piece of things, but also on the language and vocabulary piece of things. So if we think just about our best conceptual friend, Scarborough's reading rope, which probably all of us on this webinar are very familiar with, language and vocabulary figure heavily into the reading rope, and there's clear evidence that they figure heavily into how kids learn to benefit from reading instruction. So for that reason, we just want to point out that we're going to talk a lot today about language and vocabulary. And in our view, there's good reason for that, because there's so much empirical evidence that it's an equally important piece of the puzzle, along with learning to decode print. So in terms of language and vocabulary, here's what, in our view, the science of reading really tells us about the importance of language and vocabulary and how it matters for reading. So language and vocabulary, even in the very early years of kids' lives in the transition to school, will be useful over time in supporting their comprehension of text. They also support kids' decoding of text, because the more readily you recognize what a word is likely to turn out to be as you are decoding it letter by letter, the more rapidly you can move through a passage. And that facility in moving through the passage supports reading. So there's value in language and vocabulary for comprehension, but also for cracking the code of print. In addition, language and vocabulary are critical for supporting interpersonal competence, which is something that all children need when they're in the classroom experiencing reading instruction. In addition to telling us that language and vocabulary are important for reading, the science of reading also tells us that language and vocabulary, as Barbara alluded to, typically require interaction. So back and forth conversation, especially with multiple turns, seems to be a really fertile context for helping kids learn about new words. And having just one conversation about new words may not be enough for most kids and for most words. In fact, multiple meaningful exposures with new language and vocabulary terms over time is a strong predictor of kids' ability to remember and use those words in the future. And finally, given that vocabulary is important and typically doesn't accrue automatically, but especially for unusual words that kids don't interact with every day in their lives, requires rich conversation and multiple meaningful exposures, there are specific strategies that teachers can use that make it more likely that children will learn and remember words, including offering kid-friendly definitions of these words, often as frequently as possible accompanied by pictures or gestures to show what those words mean. Using prompts to help children talk about the words themselves, open prompts with no one specific right answer, and also closed prompts that have yes or no, or very specific answers can be helpful. Offering feedback on what children have said in response to those prompts, again, extending those conversations helps children learn and be able to talk about vocabulary in a richer way. And finally, exposing children to complex syntax in the course of these conversations seems to be beneficial for vocabulary learning. And you don't have to take our word for it. There's a very rich body of scientific literature around the value of vocabulary and the specific strategies that are most beneficial for kids to learn those words. So I'll throw it back to Barbara to talk a little bit about curriculum.
So thanks, Annemarie. I think that all the things that Annemarie mentioned are critical. And what we have done over the years is try to rely heavily on prior research in terms of what do we know about how kids learn words, and then how can that be translated into classroom curriculum. And as this slide shows, it's not really heavily emphasized in early curricula, and that teachers really need to try to take this on themselves. And I think that what we have tried to do with the work that we've done in classrooms is to try to make this easier for teachers to do. So just to go back to some of the things that Annemarie talked about, because again, on the slide that she presented, they seem like very kind of easy things to be able to do, to say words over and again. You know, I think that we went back to look at some of the research on word learning in the cognitive literature to be able to put into our interventions and to be able to help train teachers in an appropriate fashion. So again, we understand that repeated exposure to words is really important. Some of the work suggests that kids need to hear a word at least 200 times in order to be able to use it effectively. And then we also know that, as Annemarie suggested, they need to be in meaningful context. So just saying the word, you know, pan, 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 pan is not going to help learn the word pan. You need to be able to have knowledge of that. And let's use the pan to cook eggs. Let's use the pan to cook, you know, waffles or something. But we probably wouldn't use a pan to cook waffles, but to cook something like that. But to have it in a meaningful context. And then also to be able to have opportunities for the children to use those words themselves, to hear themselves say the words, and to be able to get corrective feedback. Did they use the word correctly or not? So it sounds like an easy thing to do, but there's a lot that's invested in being able to train teachers to be able to use vocabulary in meaningful ways. It's not that teachers don't want to do it. They do. They're invested in doing it. But it actually is more of, in terms of the science of reading, it's the science of using strategies in classrooms to actually get children to be able to have those opportunities to engage in being able to learn vocabulary. And then the other important thing is to be able to, when a child learns a word, is to be able to know that they can use it over time. So they may learn it in a theme based on plants, but can they use it again in the springtime when they're talking about maybe oceanography or something like that? So being able to understand a word and use a word over time. And so what we have observed, and I think other folks have also recorded this in research, is that these opportunities can often be fleeting in classrooms, that teachers will say a word and give a definition of a word, but that won't have the opportunity to go back and to talk about it. And some of the work with our interventions is to be able to create systems for them to be able to reintroduce words through repeated readings, to be able to work with children in terms of showing picture cards, to be able to see words and have experience with them. So we try to be able to give children opportunities to be able to focus on words. And just as an important aside, we also in our work have learned that it's important to focus both on tier 1 words as well as tier 2 and tier 3 words, because children need to be able to have a variety of knowledge as they learn to read and then be able to comprehend. Next slide, Annemarie, thank you. So this is really kind of captures some of the work that we tried to do. We aim to find simple, usable ways for teachers to emphasize vocabulary and encourage children to talk. And again, it sounds like a very simple way to do, but teachers have a lot going on in their classrooms. I don't need to tell people on this webinar about that. And so we have tried to be able to create is ways in which teachers can find ways in their classroom to be able to emphasize words, to be able to provide definitions for words, and also then to be able to provide children with opportunities to use those words in meaningful context. I think Annemarie is going to talk a little bit how we have tried to do that in the interventions that we've worked on over the years.
That's right. I'm going to tell the group a little bit about how our work has evolved over time. It would be a beautiful story if we had created one intervention and it was fantastic and worked perfectly, and that was the end of things. But in fact, this has been a trajectory, a sort of trial, and not necessarily error, but like slightly missing the mark a little bit on the perfect outcome over time. So here you see a slide that shows a sort of timeline of intervention packages that the team created, beginning with a package at Johns Hopkins that Barbara and her longtime master coach, Mary Alice Bond, worked on. And then I came into the team after that with an early reading first project in which there were lots of materials around language and literacy. The coaches had a relatively small load of teachers. They were out in classrooms once a week working with teachers for, I would say, at least 2 hours at a stretch. And the teachers got all these books and props that depicted the vocabulary words they were trying to impact, and then lots of outcomes. We were trying to raise kids' alphabet knowledge and also sound awareness and vocabulary. So it was a very time-intensive, heavy lift, sort of the Cadillac model of teacher professional development. And it worked pretty well, but would have been very difficult to scale as designed because there was so much time, so much coach time, so much teacher time, so many materials. So we shifted in the sort of green box there right in the middle to a remote model funded by an I3 project where all of the coaching was delivered remotely. And the teachers would videotape themselves in their classrooms, upload their videos, the coaches would give them feedback, and the teachers received relatively few classroom materials. And we endeavored through the coaching to help the teachers use the materials that were already there in ways that would foster kids' vocabulary knowledge. And so this was a much more cost-effective model, but we discovered was less effective, not so much in terms of teacher learning. We saw big gains in what teachers were doing in their classrooms, but less effective for kids' outcomes. And so from that, we really took the adage or the principle that particularly when you're trying to help teachers build these one-on-one interaction or one-on small group interaction kinds of activities and skills, having a coach there really helps. So that brought us to the turquoise model, the story talk model, where we moved some of the things that we had coaches do in person back in the light green box, that early reading first grant, moved those to really rigorous lesson plans, lesson guides for teachers to use, also some vocabulary cards and other tools. And we found that that was a pretty good balance of things. I'll talk about that in just 1 minute, but that's the model that we have been working with over the last, I would say, 5 years, adapting that model for use with younger children who are just moving into the preschool context, and then older children who are leaving preschool, with the goal of having a sort of continuum of high quality early vocabulary across that school transition period. So just a quick look at what Story Talk included. When teachers participated in our Story Talk intervention, they received a series of classroom books. So they had 2 books to read, trade books to read each week. They got a series of vocabulary cards to help them emphasize vocabulary that we had selected from those books. And then they got lesson guides that took them through how to read the books, open-ended questions they could ask the children about the vocabulary, and then also some center activities that reinforce the vocabulary in small groups. So the happy story here is that with this balance of materials and then less extensive coaching, where the coach came in just once every other week for about an hour, so significantly less coaching, we found that we were able to improve teachers' classroom instruction, including their instructional support on the class and also their classroom organization, because they had a series of things they could actually implement pretty easily when the day got started. And we did also find evidence that we improved children's vocabulary on the words that were taught in the curriculum, like cat and bird, or bluebird, and also their standardized vocabulary on standardized assessments, which is a really helpful finding because it suggests that we're able to close some of the gaps that some of our learners may be coming in with, particularly if they're coming into school from less highly resourced backgrounds. So Barbara's going to talk a little bit about the takeaways that work offers for teachers of young children.
Thank you, Annemarie. So one of the things that Annemarie started the presentation with is this filling the gap between research to practice. And I think that's something that our work has really tried to focus on, because as important the research is, it's more important in some ways, how can it be put into a classroom to actually be effective for children? So on the next slide, we're going to talk through a couple of things that we think are important in terms of what matters in the classroom. I think that from the work that Annemarie and I have done is that the field needs to translate research to practice in collaboration with teachers. I think one of the things that we've learned over the years is that we may have some really, what we think are really great ideas, and then we get into the classroom and teachers tell us, well, that's not going to work. And honestly, that's really the way to do this. I think folks will know that, in the sense that the bridge between research to practice is understanding how these research practices can be adapted and be put into classrooms where they benefit kids. And that's really the goal. So our work with teachers has really, I think, helped us refine through iterative processes how we can take what we've learned and be able to put them in classrooms so that the teachers can actually use them and use them effectively. So I think at this point, we really need to thank all the teachers that we've worked with, both in Baltimore City and Philadelphia and New York, in terms of the work that they've helped us be able to figure out how to put these research into practice. So that's one thing that we've learned. The second thing is the curricula has to be feasible for teachers to work in real world classrooms, which again is what we talked about before. Teachers will tell us what they can and can't do. A large part of some of the work that we do, especially in preschools, is around trying to increase the dosage of vocabulary during the day. And we work a lot with teachers in terms of trying to extend what they do during book reading onto center activities. Well, in some classrooms, that looks better than others. And so we work with teachers to be able to try to best adapt for them how can we get these practices into their classroom, again, to be able to benefit children, but also being able to figure how can it be adaptive for the classroom that they live and work in. So again, I think these are things that we need as researchers, as we try to bridge research to practice, to be able to be aware of. The next thing is that materials really matter. We often do come bearing gifts in classrooms, and that I think is a good thing. Many of the curricula, at least in the schools that we work in, they do have some resources, but not all. And so we try to be able to provide teachers with materials, both books, but also picture cards and other things that they're able to use to be able to support the instruction that we're asking them to do. And so again, I think that this does matter in terms of trying to get a variety of text in the classroom, both informational and storybooks, and to be able to actually have the materials that they need to be able to create the environment that we're asking them to do. I'm going to turn this over to Annemarie now.
Okay, and I'll wrap up with just a couple final things that we think are useful. As we mentioned, we feel that language and vocabulary need to be emphasized. They're critical parts of kids' functioning, and certainly they're learning to read. And so important to keep a sort of front of mind as we think about the science of reading and what the active ingredients are in kids' success there. We also have found that ongoing training and coaching are essential for teachers. So in all of our time doing this work, we've really never considered working with teachers for less than an academic year. And we found some additional benefits of working with teachers for more than 1 year. Some teachers participated for 2 or even 3 years. And we think this ongoing support is really helpful when you're trying to guide teachers in thinking about and analyzing the sort of fundamental routines and interactions in their classroom. It's a heavy lift for teachers to really think about the things that may be automatized and the kinds of questions that they ask their kids. We also think along those lines that coaching is really critical for teachers over an ongoing period of time, and that coaches need specialized support and guidance. Often I think there's an idea that coaches are expert teachers, which they are, but that once they're placed into a coaching role, they're pretty much good to go. And we found that coaches really appreciate the chance to continue to learn and build their knowledge and talk to one another together so that they're able to develop a learning community that is sustaining for them. So Barbara will wrap us up.
Just real quickly, we're running out of time. Again, enormous gratitude to our school partners in Baltimore and in Philadelphia and at Mary Alice, and also to all of you for this wonderful award. Thank you very much.
Barbara and Annemarie, I think your presentation just highlights once again how very important vocabulary is. I mean, it remains the stepchild, if you will, of the Big Five family, right? And your work and the evolution of your work, being able to see that has really, really been beneficial in bringing that child out to the forefront and letting them know that, you know, that vocabulary instruction is and continues to be just really critical to the evolution of our children as readers. So I want to thank you for your collaboration with teachers, because we are teacher champions. And I want to thank you for your collaboration with each other, because you both are a dynamic team. So thank you for your work and congratulations again. And finally, last but not least, I have the honor of introducing Patricia A. Edwards. Patricia is joining us as the recipient of the ILA 2024 William S. Gray Citation of Merit, the highest individual honor from ILA and one of the most prestigious awards in the field of literacy. Now, Patricia is a member of the Reading Hall of Fame and a National Conference on Research in Language and Literacy Distinguished Scholar. She is a University Distinguished Professor of Language and Literacy in the Teacher Education Department at Michigan State University. Patricia received her BS in Elementary Education from Albany State University in Georgia, and MS in Elementary Education from North Carolina A&T University, her education specialist in reading education from Duke University, and her PhD in reading education from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She is a nationally and internationally recognized expert in parent involvement, homeschool, and community partnerships, multicultural literacy, early literacy, and family intergenerational literacy, especially among poor and minority children. Patricia served as the chair of the AERA Special Family School Committee and Community Partnership Special Interest Group, and was elected as a member of the AERA SIG Executive Member at Large Committee. She has also served as a member of the ILA Board of Directors from 2022 to 2025, and she served as a member of the ILA Board of Directors from 1998 to 2001, and was the first African-American president of the Literacy Research Association, and was the 2010-2011 president of the International Literacy Association. Wow. Without any further ado, please welcome Dr. Patricia A. Edwards. Good evening, Dr. Edwards.
Thank you so much, Cheron, for that warm introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I am honored to be the 2024 William S. Gray Citation of Merit recipient, and honored to be a part of honoring literacy leaders webinar. Today, educators increasingly recognize the importance of the science of reading in literacy development. Teachers are hungry for effective reading instruction and practices to integrate into their classrooms that reflect the core tenets of the science of reading. District administrators are exploring professional development and more to spread its adoption among their schools. But one topic that I don't see taking center stage is how to adapt the science of reading for parents, caregivers, and guardians. To understand this critical connection, I want to take you back through my personal journey as a student, then as an educator, and finally, as a family engagement researcher, to highlight the direct positive impact both successful literacy instruction and family engagement have. I want to begin by giving you some background information as to why family literacy is near and dear to my heart. Albany, Georgia is 192 miles southwest of Atlanta on the bank of the Flint River. Albany is 35 miles from Plains, Georgia, and 90 miles from Tallahassee, Florida. Doherty County as portrayed by W.E.B. Du Bois in his book, The Soul of Black Folk, was a place where vast ignorance festered untouched. Education held immense value in my family, symbolizing not just a possession, but a beacon of hope and a path to freedom. During the early 1900s in Dougherty County, my grandfather, Tate Plummer, took the initiative to establish a school specifically for the offsprings of sharecroppers and plantation residents, aiming to provide education where it was lacking. My grandfather's legacy was a long-lasting tradition in my family, symbolizing the paramount importance of education. As a child, I witnessed not only my own family's deep commitment to education, but also an inseparable connection between home and school. During my entire 6 years in elementary school, my mother held the position of PTA president, while my sister and I provided the entertainment and encounters. And my mother encountered at the A&P store every Saturday morning one of my teachers. My mother had an uncanny ability to stay informed about everything I did in school. My 4th grade teacher served as my music teacher. My 6th grade teacher was my Girl Scout leader, and Mrs. Taylor was my 1st grade teacher. She was also my Brownie leader and my Sunday school teacher. I rode to school with Mrs. Taylor, and if her yellow Studebaker appeared in your front yard after school, you were in bad trouble. My upbringing embodied the African proverb, "It takes a whole village to raise a child." I was an avid reader. I often read books to my dog, Tony, and when Tony got bored and ran away, I read to my dolls. I was confident that my dolls would not become bored. I could count on them for listening carefully, even when I mispronounced words. I gradually gained enough confidence to read to some of my neighborhood children and members of my Brownie troop in the park. Now, I recognized that I was a great reader, but I got in a little bit of trouble when I corrected the reading miscues of my Sunday school teacher. And at that point, I thought my career was completely over. But at the age of 9, I had a clever plan of how I was going to become a teacher and to have parent-teacher conferences. My daddy owned a barbershop that was in our backyard, which gave me an excellent opportunity to practice my teaching skills with the boys when they came to get a haircut. The song "Where the Boys Are" characterized my house every Saturday morning. Every Saturday, my daddy cut hair from 7 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. And I sold my parents on the idea that I could have a Saturday school from 8 to 5 p.m. What really got me excited is that I would have a captive audience. As the boys came through the gate on Saturday morning, I would say, "Good morning, boys. Welcome to Pat Saturday School." Some of the boys would say, "I didn't come to your house to go to any Saturday school." "Yes, you did." And then my daddy would ask the boys, "Can you read?" They would say, "No, sir." "Well, then you need to go to her school." I even kept permission slips on the boys. I quickly showed the same permission slip to all of the boys very quickly. And if they still resisted, I had a backup plan, which was, "If you don't come to my school, my daddy's going to cut all of your hair off and you're going to be a baldy." Many of the boys were missing teeth, and I would tell them, it would be so bad to have a bald head and snag a tooth. Well, I was an excellent recruiter. I got my captive audience every Saturday morning. I read books. I taught the alphabet, how to count. I had a full curriculum. Some of the boys would say, "You taught that last Saturday." And I would say, "I'm reinforcing your learning, boys." I kept progress reports on the boys every Saturday that attended my Saturday school. Years later, many of the boys told me how helpful those Saturday lessons were. Just like all of us thank our former teachers for the lasting impact they have had on our lives. Even though I was the youngest uncertified teacher in Dougherty County, I'm proud to say at the tender age of 9, I experienced the power of teaching. As you know, a variety of different kinds of kids go to school and they're in our classrooms. And one of the things that we know is that every home is a university and the parents are the teachers. Kathy Owl said, and I quote, "Literacy begins at home, not at school. Instruction should build on the foundation for literacy established in the home." And Kara Peterson said, "The path to literacy begins long before children begin formal reading instruction, and experiences that occur in the home influence the later course of children's reading success." And Don Davis says, and I quote, "Create an effective partnership between schools, parents, and communities isn't just a nice idea. It's a necessary. It's a necessity in today's schools." In the psychology of reading, Edmund Huey says the secret of it all lies in parents reading to their children. In Becoming a Nation of Readers, the point made was the single most important activity for building the knowledge required for eventual success in reading is reading aloud to children. First story. I received a W.K. Kellogg Fellowship. Those are the cornflake people in Battle Creek, so please eat your cornflakes. While teaching at Louisiana Tech, the students would always say to faculty at the end of student teaching that there were 2 things we had not done a good job on. We had not shown them how to work with families and children, and we had not dealt that well with discipline. So when I had the opportunity to apply for W.K. Kellogg Fellowship, I decided to look at the family from a psychological, sociological, educational, cross-cultural, and policy perspective. At the same time, I've been appointed to the Head Start National Board, looking at the incongruence between Head Start and public schools. In Ruston, there were 3 elementary schools. I went out and I visited with the 3 elementary school staff in kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade. And I've been to a lot of different places, and I'm now convinced that every teacher around the country tend to tell parents to read to their children. And this is what they said to me. So for the first 6 months, I was trying to develop relationships with the parents and talk to them about how to do school. But finally, I had one question I wanted to ask them. I said, "Do you read to your child at home?" All of them told me that they read to their child at home. So I did a quick little study and I said, okay, even though you're not from the state of Missouri, I want you to show me what you would do if a teacher were to ask you to read to your child. What I found is that read to your child is a very simple teacher directive. It was a very complex task. What I discovered is that 4 out of the 5 parents that I focused in on, I had 18 in the study, but I focused in on 5 of the parents so out of the 5, only 4 of the parents had difficulty reading. And so what I ended up doing is writing a little paper in Jo Beth Allen and Jenna Mason's book entitled Risk Makers, Risk Breakers is a tongue twister, reducing the risks for young literacy learners. And that, to me, at that point, said that we needed to shift from telling parents to read to their children to showing them how to read to their children. I left LSU. I moved from Louisiana Tech to LSU. And I was invited to come down to Donaldsonville Elementary School. Donaldsonville is about 40 miles from Baton Rouge, about 50 miles from New Orleans. It was a school that was struggling with annual yearly progress. And I didn't want to go to Donaldsonville, but anytime your associate dean's wife asks you to do something and you want to be politically correct, you say yes. So I go down to Donaldsonville Elementary School. There are 726 children. 80% of them are low-income Black children. 20% of them are low-income white children, and no one is getting along. The parents are talking about the teachers, and the teachers are talking about the parents. And so I go in and I developed 2 programs. The first program was Parents as Partners in Reading, a family literacy training program. And what I tried to do is, instead of telling parents, I actually showed them how to read to their children. I asked the kindergarten, first and second grade teachers for their lesson plans, and whatever they were working on, I built my reading program around that. But what I discovered was that 40% of the parents at this particular school had problems with their own literacy skills. So I ended up developing Talking Your Way to Literacy, a program to help non-reading parents prepare their kids for school. These 2 programs were recognized by First Lady Barbara Bush as one of the top 10 family literacy programs in the country. I was also highlighted on the Dan Rather Nightly News as one of 5 Americans everyone should get to know. I was also commended for my work in family literacy in a nationally televised documentary hosted by Felicia Richard, First Things First. And this associate editor for the Washington Post wrote a story about the Donaldsonville Project entitled Storybook Success in Literacy and put it on the front page of the Washington Post. And that's how I got a chance to meet First Lady Barbara Bush. And when I first met First Lady Barbara Bush, I said to her, I'm happy that former First Lady Nancy Reagan said no to drugs, but I'm extremely happy that you're saying yes to literacy. If we're to have a kinder and gentler nation, we need people who can read, write, and compute. I like this quote by First Lady Barbara Bush. She says, I believe that if every man, woman, and child could read, write, and comprehend, we would be much closer to solving many of our nation's serious problems. My work in Donaldsonville, Louisiana, was a story of learning to support children's literacy development. From my work, I then coined 2 terms, differentiated parenting and parentally appropriate. I proposed the concept of differentiated parenting as a way to urge schools not to place all parents in one basket. When schools design programs for parents, one size does not fit all of them. I used the term parentally appropriate to stress the point that because parents are different, tasks and activities must be compatible with their capabilities. This is not to say that parents' goals for their children vary greatly. They all want their children to succeed in school, but it is clear that children's perspectives and abilities affect their ability to support their children in particular ways. And so I propose that schools ask parents what they are capable, what they feel capable of doing, what activities they are willing to do, and what activities they feel responsible for doing. Information of this nature could possibly build better homeschool connections between the school and the wider variety of parenting groups. After leaving Louisiana, I was invited to the Center for the Study of Reading at the University of Illinois. And from that, and after leaving the Center for the Study of Reading after 1 year, I joined the faculty at Michigan State University. At Michigan State, I worked at a professional development school for 4 years. My dean was over the Holmes Group, and one of the rallying calls was teaching for conceptual understanding. And one of the things that I said to Dr. Lanier is, how can you teach for conceptual understanding when you don't conceptually understand that much about the people that you're teaching? At this particular school, I asked 3 questions. What is your school's history of involving parents and families? What is your school's philosophy regarding parent involvement in school activities? And what training and skills do you need for involving parents in school affairs? I must tell you, this professional development school that I worked at was built in 1952. In 1952, it was a first-time homeowners community and all-white community. When I went to that school in 1990, it was a transient and renters community. It was a trailer park and then downtown inner city Lansing. And the teachers were trying to still teach and work with families in the same kind of way, and it wasn't working. So we figured out some other ways to work with parents. I asked them to discuss their present conditions, their goals, their bridges, and their first steps. And I communicated to the teachers that the conversation around parent or family refers to anyone involved in raising a child. It might not be the biological parent that raises a child. And that parent involvement had multiple meanings, understandings, and interpretations. And most people think about ice cream, social spaghetti, dinners, pancakes for breakfast. That's interesting, but that's not what I was focusing on as a part of this. I wrote a little book entitled Tapping the Potential of Parents. And in this particular book, I worked very specifically to talk to teachers about the variety of ways in which to interpretate parent involvement. And of course, it gets down to definitions. Like what I asked each teacher to write down their definition of parent involvement, the school's definition, and what were the conflicts between the school's definition and their definition. One of the things that I've discovered about family involvement is that everybody blames everybody. And I'm gonna quickly read to you a poem entitled, this is a story about 4 people. Everybody, somebody, anybody, nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was asked to do it. Everybody was sure somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. Everybody blamed somebody when nobody asked anybody. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and say to you that we need to change our mindset. And one of the things that I did, these are a variety of different books I wrote, was to talk about social equity teaching, and I can give you all a handout on that. But one of the things that I want to skip down to is that at this particular school, I developed 4 concepts of how to help teachers work with their parents. One were parent stories. Parent stories gives us information about each child's literacy development. And I made the point that when a parent takes a child to the doctor is very dependent on the history of the child's illness. So doctors collect family histories, lawyers collect depositions, architects collect a lot of information about our lifestyles, but very few teachers have information about a child's literacy history. I introduced the idea of demographic profiles. I talked about the idea of a scope and sequence of parent involvement built around the curriculum. Just as we have a scope and sequence of the curriculum, we should also have a scope and sequence of parent involvement built around the curriculum. I'm going to skip down. I like this quote by First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, we have to face the fact that either all of us are going to die together or we're going to learn to live together. And if we are to live together, we have to talk. And I think that's very, very crucial that teachers understand how to do that. I like this quote by Van Griffin Green that every parent has his or her own story to tell. Robert Coles, in his book, The Call of Story, contends that one's response to a story is just as revealing as the story itself. I like this quote by P. David Pearson. He says, children are who they are. They know what they know. They bring what they bring. Our job is not to wish that students knew differently. Our job is to turn each student's knowledge and diversity of knowledge we encounter into a curricular strength, instructional inconvenience. One of the things that I did at the Professional Development School was to create what I call parent-informed groups. It's a difference between being a kindergarten parent versus a first grade parent, second grade parent. And this really worked well because the parents were able to understand what we were doing in school around the grading periods. And we worked on showing them how to do this. So in kindergarten, we worked on sharing time, first grade emergent literacy, second grade reading and writing connections, third grade writing process, and fourth and fifth grade content area reading instruction. One thing that I want to share with you, because I know I'm getting close to time, is that these are some of my former graduate students, and I asked them, you notice these are all young white teachers, and I asked them, I said, when you were teaching in public schools or private schools, what were some things that you wanted to know more about how to work with families? And what we did, we wrote a little book called Partnering with Families with Student Success, and there are 24 scenarios. And we came up with some of the topics that teachers might not think about until they get into the classroom. So we wanted to not only do this for pre-service teachers, but also for in-service teachers. And these were some topics that they came up with. And there are 24 of them. One of the things I want to say in closing, if the way we teach is guided by the needs of developing children, then it will not only reshape our classroom practice, but it will reshape our classroom environment. The classroom acts as a kind of aquarium, reflecting the ideas, ethics, attitudes, and the life of the people who live in it. Everyone deserves a full life. Education is the key. And I love this quote by Mary Jean LaTondra. America's future walks through the doors of our schools every day. And I love the song by Whitney Houston. She says, the greatest love of all. Children, I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess. Give them a sense of pride. To make it easier, let the children's laughter remind us how it used to be. Thank you. And if you need to get in touch with me, that's my email. And thank you.
So much, Patricia. I think we all just enjoyed so much hearing about the incredible work you've done over the years. I was personally struck by how you kept referring to each one of your books as a little book. We just wrote a little book. And I think with a pedigree as wide and vast as yours and your career and the work that you've done, I think you would consider many of those little books in comparison to the work that you've done in the field and with teachers and parents. So thank you for your work. I appreciate it. And I'm sure all of us do. And at this time, we're going to answer a few questions that have been posed by the audience. So we have one question from the audience from Keisha. She said, would you have any advice on how to get parent involvement similar to your study at the secondary level, especially high school?
Well, one of the things that I did, I've never really worked at a high school, but I have taught with high school teachers, is that they would have parents come in and go, just like we have children who visit their families' jobs to see what they do. I've had, and I've worked with some people to make this happen, is for the parent to go and be in 10th grade, 11th grade, or 12th grade, and they go to all the classes and have a sense of what the child is doing in the school. And that really worked well, because sometimes people have forgotten what it means to be a student in a classroom. And a lot of parents don't necessarily know how to help their children. So just as I developed these parent informant literacy groups at the elementary school level, I think that high school teachers could do the very same thing. In high school, you have parent involvement, but it's more event-based parent involvement, like band boosters. And I believe in curriculum-based parent involvement rather than just event-based parent involvement. Because if you want to improve the curriculum, you need to have parents involved. I mean, some high schools have had what they call book clubs, because I know when you start reading books like Great Expectations or whatever the canon is, it would be nice to create those book clubs between parents and their children, because a lot of times high school parents will say, you know, you go off and do your homework. And sometimes high school kids have little smart mouths, and they would say, well, I don't see you reading. So then this would be an opportunity to connect with your child.
Correct. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I don't see any more questions from the audience. Please feel free to drop those questions in the chat. I do have a question for the panel. Just having listened to all of your presentations, Barbara and Annemarie, your focus on vocabulary, Gwynne, your work around critical literacy, critical media literacy, and even with Patricia's work with parents and their involvement. And we know that vocabulary instruction is absolutely critical to reading and children becoming lifelong readers. And so my thought was around how we mitigate vocabulary issues for children who have parents who may not have the resources, the education to address these issues at home. And I wonder if any of you have any thoughts about how you get caregivers involved in this rich vocabulary experience, how some of your work may address those lack of resources in children. And if Barbara or Annemarie or Gwynne, if you have any thoughts about that, we'd love to hear them, because as a parent of a budding preteen, critical media literacy and understanding much of the vocabulary that she's using these days, it is over my head, Gwynne. So the boom boom cream is over my head. So if you guys have any thoughts about that, we'd love to hear from you. Annemarie?
I can just give a quick mention of a project. So our team is well aligned conceptually with Dr. Edwards, in that we are big fans of curriculum-based family involvement. And one of the things that we often see, particularly in under-resourced communities, is sort of an overarching idea that families are too busy to get involved with children, or that they don't have the skills that they need to do that. And certainly there are some families who are experiencing crises. That happens in any community. But our evidence really shows quite clearly, it's not just us, that families of young kids in Head Start and early Head Start are really invested in wanting kids to be successful, but schools don't give them a lot of specific information about what's happening in the curriculum. Maybe you get like a weekly newsletter with the sense of what the theme is, but generally, things don't come home like, here's an extra copy of a book that we read this week, and you can ask your child the following questions, or here are 5 vocabulary cards that we're sharing with you. And we shared very similar ones in school. So we built an intervention that was aimed at families, that sort of, it was called Story Talk at Home. And so it fit right alongside the Story Talk in classrooms. And I think what we discovered, that was interrupted by COVID, unfortunately. And what we discovered is that, we went into it really wanting to print a lot of stuff and have a lot of like hard copies of things. And families get so much stuff that comes home in their kid's backpack that's like all wadded up at the bottom with like hair stuck to it, that an online approach makes a lot of sense. And so Barbara and another colleague of ours really pioneered a texting model where families get texts from the classroom with a couple of vocabulary words, and that worked actually quite nicely. So we've experimented with a few things that really pair a curriculum related piece for the home. And I think the texting worked out for us better than the paper and pencil.
Well, one of the things that I did is because a lot of schools complained that the parents that need to come to school don't come to school. And if you think about it, every chamber of commerce advertises schools. And so what I did, I found where all the parents worked and asked their employers to let them off once a month. So we got 100% participation because if you are let off your job to come to school, you're going to come and participate. And you know, a lot of schools have open house. To me, open house is a party. And so I worked with some places like McDonald's, Denny's, Burger King, to have the teacher meet with parents in groups of 5, where then you could have a focused conversation and ask questions. And I think high school people can do the same thing. You can meet somewhere. You know, everybody has their nose in the business of school. And so if you're going to criticize schools, then you need to do everything you can to support them. And so we got 100% participation, because like I had never worked in a collective bargaining state. And, you know, if teachers are going to stay late, you have to pay them. So teachers don't want to come after school. And sometimes parents, you know, can't come. And so I think if you really want to work with different kinds of families in different kind of ways, you have to figure out the dynamics of the community where, because sometimes people don't think teachers have sick children. Teachers also have sick pets. And so they're human beings too. So meeting in groups of 5, you could be in a more civil conversation, and you could share with. And one of the things that I think schools need to do is let parents know at the beginning of the year what kinds of things they're going to be doing all year. Because if you think about it, if your child is playing a sport, the coach gives you the dates and times for the entire year. But for some reason, parents think when they drop their kids off in August that they're done. No, you're not done. You need to work with your child. So I tell parents, whatever grade your child is in, that's the grade you're in. You in first grade or kindergarten, all the way up to high school.
I think we can say amen to that. Gwynne, did you want to add something?
Well, I was just saying that I work as I taught in San Antonio, and the university I work at is a Hispanic serving institution. So we do a lot of work with students who are emergent bilinguals, and a lot of study, particularly of cognates across languages, helping build on strengths of knowledge that parents and students have. Now I'm thinking of older kids, right? Because a lot of those cognates really connect to academic language in middle school and high school, and allow both students who are native English speakers and those who are bilingual to see those connections across languages and across understanding. And I found that's a way that can be very engaging for older kids and for parents, because it builds on their strengths and it makes them the experts in the room when they bring their language strengths. In particular, now most of our students who are non-native speakers are speaking Spanish, but of course Texas has large populations of students coming from other language groups as well. And so but particularly, we've had a lot of students coming from Haiti, and Haitian Creole also works very well with cognates also. And so I would say that. I mean, in terms of digital media, I think that's a real way to bring parents in, right? Because if nothing else, we've all got phones probably. Although I hear the Gen Zers are all moving towards dumb phones because they want to de-digitalize themselves. So that could be an interesting direction too.
And don't tell me anything else I have to learn.
Oh no, it's easy. They're just going back to flip phones. They're just going back to flip phones. They don't want to have internet on their phone.
They don't want to be that smart. Well, I tell you, I'm smarter and I'm wiser now because I've been in the presence of genius. And I want to thank you, each and every one of you, for everything you have shared with us tonight. We're running out of time. So as a reminder, ILA's Literacy Leadership Awards and grants are currently opening for those of you watching, and we're accepting submissions for the 2025 recognitions. The deadline for submitting is February 3rd, 2025. And we encourage you to visit the website at literacyworldwide.org/awards and grants, the entire word, for more information.
Thank y'all so much for having us. I enjoyed hearing the other talks too. I was so glad I got to go first because then I could just relax and listen.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
you all
you.
were absolutely phenomenal. And thank you for joining us, listening in, everyone who is here and sharing your questions. Just a reminder, the closed caption recording of this event will be available within the next 5 days. You'll be able to access that at literacyworldwide.org/digital events. Thank you very much and have a beautiful evening.
Thank you.